Captain Midnight.
This video is brought to you by Audible. So honestly, I didn't expect to be making a Rick and Morty video this week, but some news came out recently that I decided I just had to talk about. If you haven't heard, a Rick and Morty anime has been greenlit for a 10-episode season that will run on both Adult Swim and HBO Max. The series is being created by showrunner Takashi Sano, who has actually done a couple Rick and Morty shorts already, including Rick and Morty vs. Genocider, which has managed to rack up over 9 million views on YouTube. It's an interesting move for Rick and Morty, and one that I've already seen some kind of mixed responses to. So that's what I wanted to talk about this week, why I'm hopeful that the series will produce something interesting, and how it could bring something truly new to the table. Be sure to let me know what you think of the spinoff by commenting down below. And if you're not subscribed yet, you could always hit that button and the little bell. But with that out of the way, let's get into it.
じいちゃんがなぜ僕を置いて一人で行っちゃったかはわからない。でも、僕はじいちゃんの助手で、冒険のパートナーだ。
The biggest reason I wanted to talk about Rick and Morty the anime is that I think it's going to be facing some unique challenges that are totally distinct from most spin-offs. Obviously, spin-offs are nothing new on TV, from Laverne and Shirley and Xena to Joey and Fear the Walking Dead and so many more. It's clear that there's a ton of different ways to tackle the spin-off concept. Most spin-offs simply take one or two characters from the mothership and expand on that by adding a new location and building a new cast around them. Think Angel or Frasier. There's also no shortage of prequel spin-offs, like Better Call Saul or the upcoming House of the Dragon. Now, those two examples probably won't have that much in common, except that they're both prequels that will likely recontextualize elements of the original show. Then there's series where the spin-offs are less about taking characters from one show to another, but rather using the same world to tell different kinds of stories, like Star Trek Deep Space Nine or many of the Gundam shows. But the Rick and Morty anime is in kind of a unique position. It's a show that will be following the exact same characters as the main show, while the main show is still ongoing. There's just not that many series like that. Something like the recent Star Trek Strange New Worlds, for instance, shares many characters with the original series, and even the setting, the Starship Enterprise, but obviously, it's not going on the air in 1968. There's over half a century of time separating these productions. The Rick and Morty anime will definitely not have that. It'll be airing alongside the main show, using the exact same characters and same premise. And I really can't think of many examples like that. Really, only one is coming to mind, and it's also an anime. Supernatural the Animation, which premiered in 2011 while the CW show was in the middle of its incredibly long run. It's pretty fun for what it is, though it did only last a season, so I'm interested to see if Rick and Morty's anime ends up having a bit of a longer run. Obviously, there could be other examples that I'm totally blanking on, so if you know of a show that's a spin-off of another show that also uses all the same characters while the original was still on the air, put that down in the comments because I'd be pretty interested to hear it. But at the very least, I think it's safe to say that it's pretty rare. So that does put this show in a very weird situation. The anime is basically trying to do Rick and Morty while Rick and Morty itself is still in full swing. Now normally, I would say that sounds like a terrible idea, but I think the shorts that already exist provide a pretty good argument that the anime version can hold its own and feel like a distinct entity. Rick and Morty vs. Genocider shares many of the same characters, and the plot of it could easily be repurposed into a story on the main show, but tonally, it feels completely different. I think what works so well about these shorts is that neither of them treat its premise like a goofy throwaway gag. It's not a Rick and Morty parody of an anime, it's a Rick and Morty story being told by a rock-solid animation team working in that style. There's jokes in the short, obviously, but the short itself is not being treated as a joke at all. I'm guessing that'll carry over to the series itself, which I think is smart because I'm much more interested in seeing someone try to actually tell great stories with these characters, not just going in for really easy anime parody gags. Tonally, these shorts walk a very fine line. Rick is still Rick, he serves the same role in the stories and feels very in line with the attitude and philosophy of the character as we know him. But the change in style, tone, and language means that this Rick still has a completely different feel to him than Justin Roiland's version. There's an earnestness to these shorts and how they approach world building that feels totally distinct from the original. Where Rick and Morty are usually riffing on an old sci-fi or fantasy trope and using that as background to quickly establish the premise, the anime shorts invite you to really bask in the strangeness of this world. There's a sense of whimsy and unironic wonder to them that you won't see too much of on the main show. And I hope the anime leans into things like the bit where Morty flies around Tokyo, because those are the sorts of scenes that truly set this style apart. Of course, there's nothing wrong with Rick and Morty being drenched in meta-humor and irony. That's a huge part of what made the show special in the first place. But if the anime really wants to set itself apart and justify its existence as its own thing, I think turning that on its head would be smart. Maybe it'll approach the stuff that the show usually treats flippantly and make it a little bit more earnest and sincere. Now, I've mostly talked about the potential upsides of the anime, but I should probably mention some of the possible pitfalls as well. For one thing, the shorts that exist so far aren't terribly funny. Not that they're self-serious or have bad jokes or anything, there's some funny and clever moments, but I think it's pretty undeniable that they don't come anywhere near matching the amount of verbal and visual gags that you'll find in most 5 to 10 minute stretches of Rick and Morty. That doesn't have to be a bad thing, as the anime, if executed well, could be a more dramatically focused show. But I can see it being a real turnoff for some viewers, who come to Rick and Morty for the fast-paced humor above all else. I would not say I'm pessimistic though. For one thing, the responses to the shorts seem to be pretty positive overall. And I would argue that Summer Meets God, Rick Meets Evil was actually a much better riff on both Voltron and Evangelion than that Gotron episode was easily. Having these shorts done by the same team was a great idea because it means we have a lot more to go on than just the words Rick and Morty anime. We have examples of this working, and in my opinion, working pretty well. I'm really interested to see what this team comes up with when they have a much bigger canvas to work with. 10 episodes isn't a ton, but it does give them some more leg room to really put their own spin on these characters. Probably even more so than the core duo, I'm really interested to see what the supporting cast looks like through the eyes of a new creative team. Another interesting thing about the project is that some episodes will apparently use events from the original show, so maybe we'll get things like their take on Meeseeks and Destroy that's being done in a totally different context. Now I hope they don't lean on that too much, because I would say I'm more interested in original concepts, but honestly I do think it's an interesting artistic experiment. I've always been fascinated by how different creative teams tackle the same material. It's not a perfect comparison, but it kind of reminds me of Bela Lugosi's original Dracula film and how another crew was shooting a Spanish language version with an entirely different cast on the same sets. Watching both of those back to back was a really strange and worthwhile experience, and I would love to do the same with an episode of Rick and Morty and an anime take on the same episode. In the end, I gotta say, I'm looking forward to this series. I'm sure many fans will feel differently, like I honestly have no idea how those shorts are perceived in the anime fan community, but at least for me, I have some real hope that there'll be a weird, creative take on the core concept of the show. And hopefully, there's something you can watch and enjoy even if you don't watch the original, something that can stand on its own 2 feet. So we'll see how it turns out, but I genuinely think there's a lot of potential here. Oh, and speaking of anime and earnest, well-executed sci-fi, one of my favorite series ever is Legend of the Galactic Heroes, which is based on a Japanese novel series. I got to experience the really great translation on Audible. Dawn, the first story, is an amazing audiobook and the start of one of the best fictional universes in the history of science fiction. And of course, sci-fi is just one part of their massive library. The Audible catalog is always expanding, so there's something new to check out whether you're into fiction, biographies, self-help, and way more. Their Plus catalog goes beyond audiobooks and features great audio content in all sorts of formats. It's already a good deal, but it's made even better by the fact that I can download these and listen to them whether my phone is online or not, which has always made Audible kind of the go-to for road trips for me. You can get a free Audible credit now by going to audible.com/midnight or texting midnight to 500-500. That's audible.com/midnight, or just text midnight to 500-500.
Here's a special tip for the fellas and girls who have not already joined Captain Midnight's new 1940 Flight Patrol. You'd better hurry up and join at once, because there's a big adventure ahead. The thing to do now is to get started. because we're going to have not only barrels of fun, but loads of free gifts and prizes, too.